Most people think dictators seize power through military coups or violent revolutions. The reality is far more unsettling. Almost every modern dictator came to power through legal means, democratic systems, or by simply being underestimated. In the next 18 minutes, we're breaking down the actual tactics used by history's most notorious dictators to go from political nobody to absolute ruler. Let's start with the one who wrote the literal playbook. After World War I, Hitler was a broke veteran with no prospects. He got assigned to spy on a tiny political group called the German Workers' Party. Instead of reporting back, he joined. By 1920, he'd helped rebrand it as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, and chose the swastika as its symbol. In 1921, when internal conflict broke out, he threatened to quit unless they made him chairman. They caved. His first attempt at power was a disaster. The 1923 beer hall putsch failed spectacularly, landed him in prison, and should have ended his career. But Hitler understood something crucial about modern power. Failure only matters if people remember it that way. He used his trial to give speeches, wrote Mein Kampf in jail, and reframed the whole thing as martyrdom. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, Hitler had his opening millions were unemployed, the government was paralyzed, and people were desperate. The Nazis went from fringe party to second largest in parliament by 1930, not through revolution, through elections. Here's where it gets disturbing. In January 1933, the conservative political establishment appointed Hitler chancellor, believing they could keep him in check as a coalition partner. They thought he was a useful tool who would do their bidding. Within 2 months, the Reichstag burned down. Hitler blamed communists, suspended civil liberties through the Reichstag Fire Decree, and pushed through the Enabling Act, which let him rule by decree. The vote was held under SA intimidation. It passed legally. By August 1934, Hindenburg was dead. Hitler had merged the presidency and chancellorship into one role called Führer, and the army swore personal loyalty to him. Total time from appointment to absolute power, 18 months, all technically legal. Stalin's path to power wasn't dramatic. It was methodical and boring, which made it unstoppable. When Lenin and the Bolsheviks took control in 1917, Stalin was already there as a trusted lieutenant. He wasn't a charismatic speaker like Trotsky or a visionary like Lenin. He was the guy who handled logistics, managed personnel, and dealt with the empire's ethnic minorities. In 1922, he got appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party, a job everyone thought was just paperwork. It wasn't. That position let Stalin appoint thousands of people, to party positions across the entire Soviet Union. While Trotsky gave speeches about permanent revolution, Stalin quietly filled every bureaucratic slot with loyalists. Lenin figured it out too late. In his final writings, known as Lenin's Testament, he warned that Stalin was too brutal and should be removed. But Stalin's allies suppressed the document. When it was finally read to party leaders, Stalin offered to resign. Nobody forced him to, because by then he controlled the votes. After Lenin died in 1924, Stalin positioned himself as Lenin's heir, organized the funeral, and systematically destroyed his rivals. Trotsky, Kamenev, Zinoviev, all outmaneuvered, exiled, or executed. By the late 1920s, Stalin had eliminated most opposition and controlled both the government and the Communist Party. His power base was so entrenched that even the Great Terror of the 1930s, which killed hundreds of thousands of party members, couldn't dislodge him. The lesson: never underestimate the person who controls the org chart. Mussolini invented fascism, but his rise to power was almost accidental. After World War I, Italy was in chaos. Mussolini, a former socialist turned nationalist, founded the fascist movement in 1919 with about 200 members. His black shirts were thugs who beat up leftists and strikers, usually with police looking the other way. In 1921, he turned the movement into a political party and got elected to parliament. In 1923, he pushed through the Asherbo Law, which gave any party that won at least 25% of the vote a huge majority in parliament. Thanks to this rigged system and black shirt intimidation, his coalition won the 1924 election with 64% of the vote, but his dramatic moment came in October 1922. Mussolini organized the March on Rome, around 30,000 blackshirts converging on the capital to demand power. It's remembered as this bold seizure of control. But here's what actually happened. Most of them took the train. They were poorly armed, and Mussolini himself stayed in Milan near the Swiss border in case it failed. The prime minister wanted to declare martial law and crush the march. King Victor Emmanuel III refused, panicked, and just handed Mussolini the government he thought Mussolini would stabilize things. Mussolini did stabilize things by banning all other political parties, dissolving trade unions, controlling the press, and creating a secret police force. When socialist politician Giacomo Matteotti accused the fascists of election fraud in 1924, he was kidnapped and murdered. Opposition parties walked out of parliament in protest. Mussolini responded by declaring dictatorship. By 1925, Italy was a one-party state. Mussolini went from fringe agitator to Il Duce in 6 years, mostly because the king was too scared to say no. Mao's rise is a masterclass in patience and propaganda. After the Chinese Communist Party split with the nationalists in 1927, Mao was sidelined party leadership, advised by the Soviets, focused on cities and urban workers. Mao disagreed. He went to the countryside and started building support among peasants. In 1930, party leaders ordered him to attack cities. Mao thought it was suicide. He obeyed, lost thousands of troops, then disobeyed and went back to rural guerrilla warfare. He set up the Jiangxi Soviet in 1931 and started winning. By 1934, nationalist forces had them surrounded. The communists were forced into the Long March, a year-long retreat across 6,000 miles of brutal terrain. Most died. But during the march, at a meeting in Zunyi, Mao became the unofficial party leader. The myth was born. When Japan invaded China in 1937, Mao used the war to expand communist control. He fought the Japanese with guerrilla tactics, won peasant loyalty by promising land reform, and quietly purged rivals through the rectification campaign of 1942 to 1943. By 1943, he was officially party chairman. After World War II, the Civil War resumed. The Soviets told Mao to negotiate. He refused. His battle-hardened forces crushed the nationalists, captured Nanjing in 1949, and on October 1st, Mao stood in Beijing and declared the People's Republic of China. From rural rebel to ruler of 500 million people, it took 22 years. Castro's revolution is one of the few that actually involved revolution, but it almost didn't happen. In 1952, General Fulgencio Batista seized power in Cuba through a coup and canceled elections. Castro, a lawyer running for office, decided armed resistance was the only option. On July 26, 1953, Castro and about 140 rebels attacked the Moncada barracks. It was a disaster. Most were killed or captured. Castro got 15 years in prison. At his trial, he gave a lengthy defense speech that concluded with, "History will absolve me." That line became legendary. Batista released him in 1955 under amnesty. Castro went to Mexico, met Che Guevara, and trained a new group. In December 1956, 82 fighters sailed to Cuba on a yacht called the Granma. They were immediately ambushed. Only about 20 survived, including Castro, his brother Raul, and Che. They retreated to the Sierra Maestra Mountains and started a guerrilla war. For 2 years, they launched small attacks, built support among rural Cubans, and ran propaganda campaigns. Meanwhile, Batista's government became increasingly brutal and corrupt, which pushed more people toward Castro. By late 1958, Batista's army was collapsing. On New Year's Eve, Batista fled. Castro entered Havana in January 1959 as a national hero. Within months, he'd consolidated power, eliminated rivals, and begun turning Cuba towards socialism. The romantic revolutionary became the authoritarian ruler. Pol Pot is the dictator nobody saw coming. He was a quiet, soft-spoken former teacher named Saloth Sar who studied in Paris in the 1950s. When he returned to Cambodia, he joined the underground Communist Party and worked as a schoolteacher while organizing in secret. In the early 1960s, after his mentor Tu Samouth was killed, Pol Pot became party leader and moved to the jungle. He was inspired by Mao's ideas but took them further. He believed Cambodia's revolution had to be purely rural, completely cut off from foreign influence, and ruthlessly simple. The Khmer Rouge started a guerrilla war in 1968. They were tiny at first, but two things changed that. In 1970, a coup overthrew Prince Sihanouk, and Pol Pot made a strategic alliance with the exiled king that gave the Khmer Rouge legitimacy among peasants loyal to Sihanouk. Then the United States began secretly bombing Cambodia to target North Vietnamese forces. The campaign, which ran from 1969 to 1973, killed thousands of civilians and destroyed villages, pushing terrified refugees into the arms of the Khmer Rouge. By 1975, the US-backed government collapsed. When the Khmer Rouge entered Phnom Penh on April 17th, they immediately forced the entire city's population into the countryside within days. They'd begun the Year Zero experiment, emptying cities, abolishing money, destroying families and executing anyone associated with the old society. Pol Pot's rise wasn't about charisma or strategy. It was about being in the right place when everything collapsed and having an ideology insane enough to fill the vacuum. Franco's rise is unique because it happened entirely through civil war, and he stayed in power for 36 years. In 1936, Spain elected a leftist coalition called the Popular Front. Conservative military leaders, including Franco, saw this as a threat and organized a coup. On July 17, 1936, military garrisons across Spain rebelled. Franco commanded the Army of Africa, Spain's most experienced force. With help from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, he transported his troops from Morocco to mainland Spain. The coup didn't succeed immediately. It split the country and started a 3-year civil war. Franco's nationalist forces controlled rural areas and received massive military support from Germany and Italy, including the Condor Legion that bombed Guernica. The Republican side, defending the elected government, got some help from the Soviet Union and international volunteers, but it was disorganized. In October 1936, Franco was named Generalissimo and head of government by the nationalist forces. He consolidated power by merging all right-wing groups, including the fascist Falange Party, into a single movement under his control. The war was brutal. Both sides committed atrocities, but Franco's forces systematically executed suspected Republicans, including teachers, union leaders, and left-wing politicians. By March 1939, Madrid fell, and the war was over. Franco declared victory and immediately began purging Republican supporters. Hundreds of thousands were executed or imprisoned. Spain became a one-party state under Franco's absolute control until his death in 1975. Idi Amin's rise proves that formal education isn't a requirement for dictatorship. Amin joined the British colonial army in Uganda in 1946 as a cook. He had limited formal education but was physically imposing and effective at violence, so the British promoted him. By the time Uganda gained independence in 1962, Amin was one of the few Ugandan army officers. Uganda's first president, Milton Obote, relied heavily on the military and promoted Amin to commander of the army. They worked together for years. Amin helped Obote consolidate power, including using the army to remove a ceremonial president in 1966. But by 1970, their relationship fell apart. There were accusations that Amin was smuggling gold and ivory from the Congo. Obote started planning to arrest him on January 25, 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth conference in Singapore. Amin staged a coup. His loyal troops seized government buildings, the airport, and the radio station. There was almost no resistance. Amin declared himself president and promised to restore civilian rule and hold elections. Many Ugandans welcomed the coup because Obote had become authoritarian. Within months, the truth became clear. Amin began purging the military of soldiers loyal to Obote, particularly from the Akoli and Lango ethnic groups. Thousands were killed. He filled the army with members of his own ethnic group and southern Sudanese loyalists. By the end of 1971, Uganda was firmly under Amin's brutal control. His dictatorship lasted until 1979. Saddam Hussein's rise is the story of a man who built power behind the scenes and then took it. Saddam grew up in poverty in Tikrit, Iraq. He joined the Ba'ath Party as a teenager and in 1959, at age 22, participated in a failed assassination attempt on Iraq's prime minister. He was shot in the leg, escaped to Syria, then Egypt, and became a hero in exile. When the Ba'ath Party briefly took power in 1963, Saddam returned. But the party was quickly overthrown, and Saddam was imprisoned until 1966. After his release, he worked to strengthen the party's organization. In 1968, the Ba'ath Party staged another coup and successfully took control. Saddam's cousin, Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, became president. Saddam was appointed deputy. But even though al-Bakr was officially in charge, Saddam quickly became the real power. Saddam built a massive internal security apparatus. He created the Mukhabarat intelligence service and used it to spy on everyone, including other Ba'ath Party members. Political opponents, suspected traitors, and anyone who questioned the government were arrested, tortured, or executed. In 1979, al-Bakr announced his resignation, reportedly due to health reasons. Though many believe Saddam pressured him, Saddam officially became president on July 16, 1979. Days later, he held a meeting with Ba'ath Party leaders and accused dozens of them of plotting against him. They were arrested on the spot and later executed. Saddam made other party members participate in the executions to ensure their loyalty. From that point on, Saddam ruled Iraq with absolute power until the 2003 invasion. So there's the pattern. Most dictators don't storm the palace. They get appointed. They exploit crises. They control the bureaucracy, or they simply outlast everyone who could stop them. The scariest part isn't how they took power, it's how often people willingly handed it to them. Which of these rises to power surprised you the most? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into history's darkest moments, hit subscribe. New videos every week.